It's all about the game and how you play it. It's all about control and if you can take it. Welcome to the heart of the stories we tell. My name is Rob, and tonight I will be reviewing yet another episode of Westworld. And whoo boy, are they getting better and better. Although, as the picture says, I'm still on Team Terminator. Before we talk about tonight, let's talk about just in general how the show's been doing. And it's amazing. But I got a comment that had a question or two for me, so I just want to touch on that for a second. First of all, yes, my spoiler warning is totally me massacring MC Hammer. Second of all, I actually am somewhat familiar with the Mary Sue, although I'm assuming that the article you're talking about is the one that I've read here since you posted this. And in that, they really talk about the fact that it's a bad video game analogy. And I can't say I 100% disagree. I do not see eye to eye with the article entirely. But I have to say, that's why I use my role-playing analogy. Now, she goes into using a Renaissance fair. I might steal that. Let's be honest, there is nothing like Westworld. It is not like going to Disneyland. It is not going on a murder mystery cruise. It is not playing a LARP version of D&D. It's not playing a LARP version of Vampire the Masquerade. It's not going to a Renaissance fair. Hell, it's not even going on the holodeck on the Enterprise. This is a completely unique mixture of all of those elements. In general, I've spoken about this before. The fact is that the Mary Sue has a feminist perspective, and I do not have that perspective. I can only talk about it limitedly. So yeah, I totally would be welcome to more insight into what women actually think about this, and what other video gamers think about it. Because I'll be honest, the writer of that article probably has me beat hands down on video game experience too. So once again, it's stop. Spoiler time. Ba-dun-dun-dun. So this week's episode, The Adversary, doesn't have Dolores in it at all. And it doesn't have William, because she's with him right now, in at least one of these messed up timelines. Well, it might have William, because there's always this theory. The Man in Black and Teddy is where we're going to start off, though. And even though the episode didn't, we're going to do that because by the end of this episode, I'm going to have to talk a whole lot about game theory. And no, I don't mean Matt Pat Show, because once again, I'm going to be drawing RPG comparisons. We're going to start, though, with the more simple, straightforward plot. Teddy seems to have gotten a little more aggressive. I really liked the scene where he decides that he really is a killer. Now, part of that's the new narrative that Ford has written for him, but part of that also is the awakening of what's going on. And the juxtaposition between him and the Man in Black. Up until now, the Man in Black has been the badass. He's the one who's been doing the killing. He's been the one that's been pushing the envelope. But today, we see that Teddy's the one doing it. If anything, Teddy's pushing farther than he is. Why is that? Because we're all getting ready to set up the twist of who really that Man in Black is. But we're not going to talk about that theory still yet. If we get to the mid-break in December and we haven't revealed it for sure, maybe we'll go into more detail then. For now, let's talk about the maze. Now, I don't believe the maze is set up based on a real myth. I believe the maze is set up entirely in-game, and my belief in that is purely based on the way things have been mentioned about it. What is the maze? The maze is the grand sum of what you are. The decisions you've made, the paths you've walked down. Isn't that kind of like your mind? Or your soul, even? What are you, if not the sum of your parts? And we get that theoretical question later in the episode. Well, earlier in the episode, but later in my review I'll talk about it. So the maze is very much an analogy for who you have become because of the path you've walked down. But the second part, the part about building a house with a maze around it, sounded a lot like what Ford did with Sector 17, didn't it? So with that, let's jump to outside the story, and what the hell is going on with Ford? So Ford has kept some of the older robots, the ones that were originally programmed by Arnold himself. But he's kept them running himself, and he's made some slight modifications to them, and they're back before they started doing the bioprinting cloning thing. Okay, that's cool and all, but why? I mean, is it just being sentimental? I know I still collect the old G.I. Joe guys that I had as a kid, and that's because I'm sentimental, and I don't throw anything away because I'm a hoarder, but those traits don't seem to fit Ford. Now, yeah, there's the whole I want a piece of my past, but there's definitely more going on. And that whole boy that's obviously him as a boy, whew, daddy issues, daddy issues, daddy issues. Also, outside the park, we learn a little more about the park. There is a futuristic pool and relaxation and bar area that they can hang out in. So, that center point that we see in the first episode where Teresa is talking and smoking is really the spot where it's the hotel that goes into Westworld. So now we're back to drawing a Disney analogy with a Disney vacation with a Disney resort. However, at the same time, we learn that that's where some of the people that work there go to unwind too. And if we didn't know that the woman that the guy was talking to was going to end up being his boss, then you have no idea how TV shows work. Although I do wonder if that head writer is still going to be talking and working there next week, because there's part of me that says, did you fire him for peeing off the balcony onto the map? No, I didn't fire him. I assumed that was him handing in his resignation. So as we segue into the what are those robots doing outside of the zone and what's going on with Teresa's storyline, I do want to just talk about legacy systems for a minute, because not everyone has dealt with them, so I just want to give my own little personal experience with them. I'm not an IT guy, I'm not a computer guy, I'm mostly point and click. However, I've worked for several companies that were too cheap to hire IT guys, so I've been the one that's helped with legacy systems because I understand the basics of computers. And what I've seen is I've seen some hodgepodges where people sit there and have a system that is a proprietary system for a company that is written in DOS, is not meant to ever be transported into Windows because it was written in like the late 80s, early 90s. Some of these were written in the late 70s, early 80s and weren't even in DOS, but were brought to DOS. That then as the Windows systems upgraded, they just kept putting little workarounds to make them work in Windows. And they just don't. And as they grow older, these things cease to work. However, I've seen people that keep those legacy systems, institute a new system, like SAP or Goldmine or one of those, and then access the database of the old one. And there's a market out there for people who know how to access the old one, just because not everything transfers through perfectly and you need to double check. And that sort of redundancy is what you're seeing here. Yeah, we have an old system. Instead of completely scrapping it and starting over from scratch, we just pulled databases out of it and put it into the new system. So we need to keep the old one operational for all the old legacy customers. Oopsie. This is not the first time I've ever seen someone use a legacy system to get around something, although I'm not going to mention any details about what I've seen in the past. Just trust me, scary stuff. What Teresa is doing is she is somehow using the legacy communication between the hosts to smuggle information. What she's doing it for, whether she's monitoring Ford or whether she's doing some sort of espionage, I'm not sure. And what happened to Elsa at the end of the episode when she was grabbed? Oof, I'm on the edge of my seat waiting for next week's episode. If I had to hazard a guess, though, she's not dead, and here's why. Because the death would have been shown now for shock value. No, I think that she's going to be captured, and I think there's more than enough time for another twist that it's not just Teresa doing this. In fact, it's entirely possible Teresa's being framed. This just seems too cut and dry and too simple for an HBO explanation. But I promised you a little bit of game theory. No, not that game theory. Specifically, Boris was in the background and finding out about her stats. Well, her stats reminded me a lot of D&D. Now, in D&D there are 6 stats, and they run from 3 to 20. In the most recent edition, 20 being the cap. Sound familiar? Sounds a lot like what we just saw? Well, like I said, there's only 6. Here's the thing, when you play a paper and dice game, you need to keep the numbers simple, and you can see that there was a little bit of that here. But these are computers. These are entire supercomputers, to be honest. So let's really think about this. They can crunch numbers much faster than we can, so they're not limited to 6, so they have God knows how many variables in there. Skills, proficiencies, things they know to say and do. Like they said in the episode, inside their heads are the most advanced computers there are. When Maeve first woke up, she also has to ask, how do you know you're not one of us? And I wonder if there's not a little bit of foreshadowing in there. Is there a reason why Westworld employees couldn't also be hosts? Who knows how many of the grunts are actually robots? And why wouldn't they be? Why wouldn't you use those as much cheaper than standard employees and much easier to control? And how do you know you're not a robot listening to this? Or maybe this was implanted in you. And I'm sorry, did I just turn your paranoia quotient up? Because I definitely did mine. And the fact that someone in the background accessed Maeve's information already and already messed with those tells me that someone might have done that to Teddy, too. Maybe that's why Teddy's more aggressive. That's why Teddy's more goal-oriented. Maybe that's why Teddy's showing up the Man in Black when it comes to killing and mass murdering. So one last question, and this one I'm putting to all of you, so I would love to see some answers in the comment section, and if so, we'll talk about them at the beginning of next week's episode. Do you think that Arnold is still alive in some fashion or another? Not necessarily flesh and blood, but maybe downloaded his brain into a computer somewhere? Maybe somewhere he's a ghost in the shell? Tell me what you think about that theory along with any other theories you might want me to cover, and we'll talk about them next week. In the meantime, I need you to like, subscribe, and share this video so that we can grow this community, and then join me back here next time as we take a walk through the heart of the stories we tell. Thanks for watching.